Danica Lorer, and this is Lit Happens, your celebration of the literary arts here in Saskatchewan. Today I'm very pleased to welcome Jean Forbes-King. Her writing has included speeches and other documents, but today we're here to talk about her new book, To Climb a Mountain, Growing Up in the Canadian West, Adventure Amid Turmoil and History. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you for having me.
So Jean, let's just start about and talk a little bit about you. So tell me a little bit about your journey as a writer.
Well, my journey as a writer, I guess we should go back a bit. I'm your stereotypical early Saskatchewan kid. I grew up on a farm. My twin sister and I grew up on a family farm. Went to a schoolhouse, one-room schoolhouse. And then, with the gift of a piano from our grandfather, my twin sister and I found that when we had completed high school, which we had done by correspondence, that we were very close to completing our ARCT, which is the Associated Royal Schools of Music as well. So we had a problem. We graduated prior to our turning 17, and the university did not accept students at that point unless they were 18. So we had time on our hands. But the principal, the superintendent of schools for the North Battleford area, asked us then if we would take on a school in the remote area, the two of us. So what we did, so that's what we did. My father upgraded a small building, originally intended as a grain bin for a teacherage. And what we did was Joan taught in the morning, I taught in the afternoon. We spent 4 hours a day each on the piano. And because we were a two-piano team, that also required a lot more time. So our little teacherage was quite crowded with two pianos. From there, my twin sister went on to a music career, whereas I went on to the University of Saskatchewan, got my BA with a major in economics, and then my work was essentially business. So in writing this book, it started out as a family history. But in talking with Trevor Harriott, and he had read the draft of the first chapter, he suggested I join the Saskatchewan Writers Guild, which I did, and it was the best move I ever made. My family history morphed into a full-fledged book.
And so when you started it, you didn't anticipate that you would publish it as a book?
Definitely not. I had done a lot of writing, of course, at the university because, of course, with my background in economics, it suited the president of that particular time, who's an agriculture economist. So I had done a lot of writing for speeches and stuff like that. No books, and I had no intention of writing a book. But after people like Trevor Harriott, Patrick Lane was very helpful as well. There's my book.
and the story is the story of, it's your husband's story. Yes. And it's not told as a, he did this in the third person, it's told in the first person. Yes. So you're telling his stories, yes, using his voice. Yes. So tell me a little bit about that process.
Well, this actually got started because of my sister-in-law, who had brought tapes to Bill when his health was failing, and suggested that he get busy, telling these tales while he was still able to. So between the tapes and our discussions, yes, I got all the information, and then of course it led to a lot of research, and the research is what took me 3 years to make sure I had filled in all of the spaces. And I had a great deal of help from people like Glenbow Museum, and they, by the way, were the first people to ask for the book, and they said they were researchers, wanted to work with it. So that was very gratifying, I must say. But yes, the book is, my husband was born in London, England, and he immigrated with his mother and brother, older brother, to a small town in Saskatchewan. And his father had died prior to his birth. He was a British Army officer in World War I, gassed in Flanders, but he lived until just before Bill's birth. But of course they got caught up in the drought and depression of the 30s. By that time, his older brother was training with the Royal Canadian Navy at Esquimalt in BC, and he brought the family, that his mother and Bill, to Victoria. And it was when Bill was traveling through the mountains, he was utterly entranced with the mountains, and he vowed he would return. Hence the book, To Climb a Mountain. But actually it has two purposes. It wasn't just that he wanted to get back into the mountains, which he did, but that his life was so difficult at that very early time that to climb a mountain had a second meaning as well.
Now, would you like to read us just a short passage from the book?
Yes. I think prior to reading it, I should say that they emigrated to Victoria. And he lost his mother at 14. It was an orphan. That was part of the difficult time. And then he was fighting a war as a teenager because he had lied to get the necessary employment insurance card in order to work. So as a teenage soldier, he fought in World War II. With the end of the war in World War II, he volunteered for the Pacific. Then that war ended too. And so he realized his dream then of becoming a forest ranger in the Alberta Rockies. Now, one of the things that was very, very timely now, of course, is fire. And in the early part during the Depression or whatever, prairie fires were a very great danger. So that's the portion I would like to read. It was travelers crossing that parched land and the cowboys who worked the ranches for whom prairie fires posed the greatest danger. One rancher, caught on the open range when hauling supplies to his home, narrowly escaped a horrifying death as a spiral of smoke in the distance quickly morphed into a line of flickering flames. As the fire reached dry brush, branches and twigs exploded into incendiaries that were carried afar by the rushing wind. Moving with the speed of a locomotive, the rapidly widening line of flames roared across the plains. Realizing his peril, the rancher swung his team off the trail and headed for a hill that rose abruptly from the prairie grassland. He went to the whip, and as the team of young broncs leapt forward, he fought for control as the wagon rocked crazily across the uneven ground. A snapped singletree or a broken wheel would have meant certain death. As the galloping horses pounded toward the hill, they were barely 100 yards ahead of the racing flames. The rancher whipped them mercilessly until they had all but reached the crest of the hill. Then he pulled back and sawed harshly on the reins. As the bits cut into their mouths, the team fell back on their haunches. The wagon came to an abrupt stop. Instantly the rancher was on the ground and in front of them, grasping the bridles of the panting and half-crazed animals with all the strength he could muster. Then the fire was upon them. Driven by the wind, the fire roared partway up the hill where it divided, then swept around on either side and sped toward the horizon. The roar of the flames dissipated, and the searing heat gave way to smoke. Then it, too, was dispersed by the wind. Standing at the crest of the hill, the exhausted man and his animals drank in the freshening air. Below them, tendrils of smoke unspooled across the blackened prairie. It was deliverance.
Well, really would like to read this book. I haven't read it yet, but I do like the stories of times gone by, and there's so many interesting stories in a book like this. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, and thank you for taking the time the many hours in sharing those stories, keeping those stories, writing those stories, recording those stories.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's, I think, rather timely because, of course, with the Canada's sesquicentennial, we're looking back in time, and this was a time. I'm not sure we have time here to tell you this. Do I have a minute?
Just a tiny minute.
The interesting thing about this is how many people I had met who wanted to know about that particular time, including a Scots couple which I met in the Vancouver airport, where they said they couldn't find this sort of information. So I said, yes, we've got information.
Excellent. Well, wherever we can get those stories, because it's such an interesting time in our history.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Jean, for being on Lit Happens.
Thank you.
I'm Danica Lorer. Thank you for watching. You can find past episodes of the show by going to Shaw TV Saskatoon on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook or look for me. You can send me an email at danicalorer@gmail.com. Thank you for watching.